So, 4th of July, is it a legitimate holiday? And I always go back to the classic libertarian sources. There was a great author, of course, with whom I had a lot of disagreements, but who had a lot of works in economic theory based upon the Bible, and he was affiliated with the Mises Institute. It was none other than Gary North. And Gary North wrote an article. This was in 2011. I just want to read a little bit of it. The 4th of July was really a farce, ladies and gentlemen, and researchers have gone on to this. You see, the British early on saw that the colonies wanted to be independent. So a lot of them said, well, let's just let them be independent. Let's let them have it. We'll put up some token resistance, then we'll surrender. But what we will do is we will maintain control of their financial systems. And if you go into the research, you'll see that all of the major banks in the United States were either founded by, are financed by, or have some ownership interest by the City of London, which is the financial center of the British Empire. See, the British Empire never disappeared, simply went underground, just like many authors say the Soviet Union never disappeared, it just went underground. And so 4th of July was not a true Independence Day. It was simply a shuffling of the power from overt power to underground power. And we see a lot of this with actually the tax structure. Gary North is arguing here that we actually shot ourselves in the foot by declaring independence and fighting Britain. He said, I do not celebrate the 4th of July, nor really do I. This goes back to a term paper I wrote in graduate school. It's on colonial taxation in the British North American colonies in 1775, not counting local taxation. I discovered that the total burden of British taxation was about 1% of the national income. It may have been as high as 2.5% in some of the colonies. Today, we're paying 50%. And we're talking about a taxation of, at its height, 2.5%. In 2008, Alvin Rabushaka's book of almost 1,000 pages appeared, Taxation in Colonial America. He goes on, the colonials, or the colonists, had a sweet deal in 1775. Great Britain was the second freest nation on earth. Of course, if you think about the fact that classical liberalism really had its flowering in Great Britain with people like Adam Smith, with people like John Locke, even with economists like David Ricardo and others, with philosophers. Of course, the Austrians know it started earlier than that, actually in Catholic Spain, in La Universidad de Salamanca, with many Jesuit priests and Franciscan priests and professors who actually independently discovered the laws of economic functioning and economic thought. And you can read a lot of their books, and also expatiated upon human freedom. Some of the first people to actually write against slavery were monks like Bartolomé de las Casas, who was a Spanish monk. This was before the British got hold of this, but nevertheless, the British did get hold of these via France and via other colonial philosophies, and it did flower in Britain. So Great Britain was the second freest nation on earth. Switzerland was probably the most free nation, Gary North says. But I would be hard-pressed to identify any other nation at 1775 that was ahead of Great Britain. And in Great Britain's empire, the colonists were by far the freest. So if you see that they had all these freedoms, what was that revolution about? And it's going to be a lot deeper than the pay grade of this podcast. It goes into Freemasonry. It goes into secret combinations and so on and so forth. We could do a whole podcast on that. I will say it loud and clear, the freest society on earth in 1775 was British North America, with the exception of the slave system, of course, a horrific anomaly that it took us a little while to get rid of. Anyone who's not a slave had incomparable freedom. Jefferson wrote these words in the Declaration of Independence: that the history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. Gary North says, I can think of no misleading political assessment. The point is that we paid a lot fewer taxes under Great Britain. So is the 4th of July a celebration of an unnecessary, perhaps vilely rooted revolution? I'll leave that for your consideration. But the important thing is your freedom, our freedom. Trump, with his misguided tariffs, declared a second Independence Day. But what would it mean to declare an Independence Day in your life, in my life? It's what my channel's all about. It's what this podcast's all about. It's why we're going into investing. But you can't be totally free unless you escape the traps. Even wealthy people are beholden to traps.